Well, I'm not sure we can live up to the high-octane expectations generated by that introductory music, but my esteemed guests and I will certainly give it our best shot. Hello from me, Steve Mead, from the Manchester Jazz Festival in the UK, and welcome to this, the latest in a series of EJN webinars covering the pertinent issues that concern the jazz sector across and beyond Europe. And you join us today for a discussion on artist commissioning and residencies. Subtitled Hot House, our provocation for today is how can we build new commissioning and residency models to support the creative development of artists? And it goes on, move slower, go deeper. I'm not sure what's going on to the EJN office there when they came up with that little phrase, but anyway, move slower, go deeper. COVID-19 is changing the way artists and programmers approach touring and collaborative music making. Commissioning new works and participating in residencies are ways to continue to work whilst traveling less and to facilitate a deeper connection with other musicians, programmers, and audiences. And this session will discuss how we can build new models and processes to support the creative development of artists. So my guests cover a range of perspectives on this. Let's meet them without further hesitation. Susana Santos Silva, hello to you. Susana is a Portuguese trumpet player, improviser and composer, currently based in Stockholm, Sweden. With a spectrum of influences from classical and contemporary music to jazz and textural sound art, she stretches the possibilities of the instrument and dissolves boundaries between composition and improvisation. And indeed, her music has been described as intoxicating, intense, and mesmerizing. Hello, Susana.
Hi, Steve. Hi, everyone.
Hi. And equally intoxicating, intense, and mesmerizing, Frank van Berkel is program director at the Bimhuis in Amsterdam, one of the Netherlands and indeed the world's best loved jazz clubs. He programs also for the North Sea Round Town Festival in Rotterdam, and he's also a frequent jury member for the Dutch Performing Arts Fund and the Boomer Boy Edgar Prize, the Dutch Jazz Competition, amongst many others. He's also accomplished, rather enviably, a Master's in Music Programming at the Artes Institution of the Arts in Arnhem. Welcome to you, Frank. Frank, you're muted. Do say hello.
Thank you. Yeah, the unmuting worked, but now works.
Thanks, Frank. Greta Pieropan works at Italy's municipality of Bassano del Grappa in the Centre for the Contemporary Scene, where she's committed to the promotion and the development of dance, and what Google's probably translated really badly as the international languages of the contemporary. So Greta's written extensively about dance and theatre, gender equality in the arts and culture, and about gender stereotypes in advertising. And as a dance dramaturg with a special interest in the contribution external viewers make to the creative process between artists and audiences. Greta, welcome to you, wherever you are. I think Greta might have disappeared somewhere, back to Italy. I hope not. Anyway, Greta joins us all the way from Italy. And also joining us today, the wonderful Xavier Lemettre, who is director of Banlieues, a cherished jazz festival held in the suburbs of Paris, most notably at the lovely club venue La Dynamo, where I would have been a couple of weeks ago for the Jazz Migration showcase. Xavier's led on the educational development and the meeting places between artists and local inhabitants, and he's initiated a number of really interesting collaborative projects that bring together artists and art forms from way across Europe. Hi Xavier, how are you doing?
Hi, I'm fine. Just a Banlieue Bleu, but not Banlieue Blues.
Blue.
We still don't have the blues.
Apologies for the miscreant S there, Xavier. I'm sure I'll make many more mistakes as we go through. Just to get us going, I thought it would be interesting to discuss what we might call the terms of reference. What do we mean by a commission and what do we mean by a residency? Just to help us frame the discussion. Perhaps Susana, just bring you as an artist in straight away on that. How do you interpret those terms nowadays, very briefly?
I guess a space to move slow and go deeper, as the European Jazz Network puts it. because it's so busy all the time, and we are always running from one place to the other, just traveling all the time, playing concerts in different places. So a residency, it's really a space, physical space, but also mental space, where you can really develop some work and have time to think about music, about art, about what we want to do, and really experiment and develop something slowly.
Yeah, I think it's
time.
something we'll explore more. Yeah, Xavier, can I just bring you in about what are your interpretations of those terms as well? Because that's something you've done quite a lot of, commissioning and artist residencies. How, from your perspective, how do you view those words?
I mean, commissioning is not a word I'm very familiar with nowadays.
Yeah.
For me, it's a bit of the past. I mean, I don't know. In '89, we were making commissions during the festival about the French Revolution to big musicians. But I mean, that was mostly the only commissions we did. Of course, residency is the main word for me, for us now here. But it happened. I mean, also 30, more than 30 years ago, because a residency, as Susana said, is a question of time at the same place, which is not especially a physical place. It can be, I mean, but it's a question of duration. I mean, mid-term of long-term instead of just a gig. And from there, this residency, I mean, it can be 1 week, it can be several months, it can be 1 year, but not the whole year. But it's mostly a long-term notion.
Yeah,
Greta, relationship with, and for us, relationship with artists for a long-term period.
Yeah, Greta? Is that a description you recognise in your work?
But for instance, I would like to add also that a residency is encounters, new encounters with audiences, with communities, and maybe we can discuss later on what we mean with audience and community, and with a new city, a new territory as well, and other artists. So we shouldn't underestimate the importance of encounters during a residency as well.
Absolutely, yes. And Frank, just to finally come to you on this, you're kind of, how have you chosen to interpret these words recently in your work at Bimhuis?
Yeah, well, I think what Susana says is slow and going deeper into art. That's one very important thing for commissioning. I think for us as a club, it's also very important to make a connection to our audience and creating also new audiences, and also helping out other artists in Europe, like unknown artists. So we, with commissions, we also try to make connections with Dutch musicians and international European musicians, and see if we can either create new audiences, but also creating new arts, new ideas, and helping the unknown musicians to an audience in Amsterdam, for instance. So that's what Greta also says. These connections are very important to us, and we also try to do this with the thematical. How do you call it in English? An approach, So in these times, we issued some 4 small commissions to artists during Corona time. What would they do in this time? So making that the theme of this moment. That's also, I think, important for commissioning, to reach out to the audience, to make this connection.
Yes, that's great. So there's a strong thread there coming through and enabling the new, I think, to happen as well. Xavier, just wanted to come back to you as well, because when we think of these types of opportunities, they are quite, from a presenter and a programmer's or producer's point of view, they can often be quite highly dependent on resources, and there's a lot that needs to be kind of put in place before often they can start to happen, and that could be financial, or could be human resources, or or time. They're quite heavy on investment, aren't they? And I just wondered if you could perhaps talk us through some of your approaches about dealing with that pressure and demand on the existing resources that you have to enable the new to happen.
Okay. Well, of course, I mean, a residency, as I said, can have different, plenty of different types of residencies. So, in fact, if you're talking about a residency with musicians coming from abroad, of course, there's a question of finance just for the hotels and the per diems but in fact, that's the first time we discovered the interest of a residency was with foreign musicians, and it was also 30 years ago. We had commissioned a project with Archie Shep and Chris McGregor's Brotherhood of Breath. So, 12 South African musicians and Archie Shep, who was already living in Paris, and they had to stay for 10 days. But they had to stay for 10 days to 7 days maybe to make this project happen. So the residency was to work together for 1 week. And that's how we discovered that while they were rehearsing, we could use them also to make workshops and to make links with audiences. And at that time, it was young teenagers. It was really in the heart of the suburb. And every day, the teenagers could see those musicians. And they were looking like, real guys, And so they were attracted, and then we began from here, from a residency of creation. But of course, so that was quite a budget to have this. But then we began also to find the interest to have musicians for 1 week or 10 days, because we could do valuable things, and then we began to look for money. And then we were a festival. And then when we became also, when we had a venue with a venue with rehearsal facilities, and a venue is with rehearsal facilities is a production tool. So here we began to make residencies with local musicians, who of course are always here. But then we offered them to work together for a few months, for 2 or 3 weeks or so, but also for a few months, or for 1 year, or maybe for 2 years. And to do different types of things and being in residency. And this is also public funds, local funds, but in fact, it's not really, I think nowadays, it's not especially a problem of money, because we are also nowadays, especially since a few months, everyone is working locally and not internationally anymore. And I'm sure already here there are new ways of working in this field of residency, and we're finding new ways every day, and we're finding means to operate this kind of works.
Yeah, this is interesting, isn't it? What COVID's taught us about efficiency and economy, and I think we'll come back to talk about that a little bit later in more detail. But perhaps Greta, coming in as a presenter and someone who's kind of, I don't know whether you're directly involved in generating resources and funds to realize projects, but do you recognize some of what Xavier has been talking about there in terms of the need to kind of locate additional resource?
I do recognize it. Yeah. Luckily, I'm not directly involved in finding fundings, because I know it's hard work, and I'm mainly involved in project with the audience for ideal with communication and dance dramaturgy. But I'm happy that we are talking about finding fundings, because it is important to underline that residency needs funding, not just for the spaces, but because the time of the research is hard work for the artists. So whether it leads to a production or it just opens up a collaboration or a research, it certainly needs a lot of fundings. And we should talk about sustainability right at the beginning of a project of residency and research, but also collaboration and networks, international network. It is true that we are working locally right now, but the phantom threats, internationally speaking, it is very, very important, especially for the local artists, the connection to the different languages developed internationally. It's still very important, especially now that they cannot travel around the world.
Yes, you used a really an interesting phrase there in that, and you said it can be really hard work for the artist. And I'm also aware that sometimes an offer of a commission, say to an artist, that can come at a time in artists' careers where it's the biggest thing they've taken on to date in their career, and it can be, at first, it can be a really exciting proposition, but it can also turn, perhaps quickly from the artist's perspective, into a nightmare of a kind of organization and kind of panic and pressure. And maybe Susana, if you could talk to us about some of your experiences from an artist's perspective of having, received an offer like that or sought an offer, and then the nature of that offer has perhaps changed as you've gone along, and you've experienced quite a range of emotional responses to the offer, if you like, which go through fear and kind of uncertainty, as well as the joy of kind of making great art.
Well, I must say that I haven't have so many experiences doing residencies. I mostly do concerts and I play festivals, and so I go from place to place and I play concerts in festivals and venues. That's what I mainly do. And in the last years, I've been really feeling the need to stop a little bit, to focus a little bit more on the music I want to do, or try to search for what I want to develop, instead of just playing 1 million concerts with different bands and travel from place to place. I did have had a great experience actually some years ago when I did a residency at the QO2, which is an association in Belgium, in Brussels. And it was really great just to be there for 1 month. And we just worked on what we wanted to work. Me and Torbjörn Tetterberg, you just came and worked with a local artist, a video artist, that with us, like, scouted town to find the interesting places acoustically, but also environmental. Like, we wanted to find places that really inspired us to play in, like outside, inside, different acoustics, and it was super interesting to do that. And for all month, all we need to think was to wake up and go to town and just record, first search for these places and then record. And it was a really great experience. And then when we were there, we also took the time to play with local musicians. We played sessions because we had the space to do so we could invite people to come and play with us. And we managed to organize 1 or 2 concerts. So that's when I did that, I really wanted to do this more, much more, and take that idea and do it in different places, in different environments, different countries, city, countryside, whatever. We managed to do 1 more in Sweden, actually, in the countryside, something like that. But yeah, to respond to your question a little bit, like it can be a little bit intimidating also when you don't really know what conditions are there. So it needs to be financially possible. So if you take a whole month or a year or months, and you have to say no to all the concerts that potentially can happen, then you really have to have some kind of fee going on. Otherwise, it's complicated because you need to take that time and say no to all other kinds of work. And then, of course, it's nice that you have the right conditions. They don't need to be luxury in any way, but just that you feel comfortable, you have a place of your own that you can work on and be comfortable.
And it allows you to just focus on the music making and the encounters.
Exactly.
Yeah. And those, Susanna's just talked about the conditions there, could conditions be right? And Frank, just to bring you in on this, what how do you start thinking about creating the right conditions for an artist, perhaps when you're thinking about engaging artists in some of the activities either around at Bimhuis or any of your other kind of programming work that is just over and above a normal gig, but an opportunity or a commission? I suppose, how do you think about making sure the conditions are right to get the very best out of the artist?
Well, I guess there are many conditions. I mean, for instance, practically, I guess we have a great venue. We have a rehearsal studio. We have a recording studio. We have possibilities for streaming and presenting in venue, of course. We are in the center of Amsterdam, so it's a great place to come over and stay for a longer time and enjoy the city and check it out. We have an enormous music scene going on, so we can make a great connection with this whole scene in improvised music and the conservatory. And there are actually quite some scenes going on. It's more than one, different scenes. But yeah, of course, there is always this money issue going on. Because to give the venue to an artist for one day or a week or longer, that will cost a lot of money for sure. Or to keep somebody accommodated in hotels or whatever costs money, and that's all apart from paying somebody just a reasonable fee. So these practical possibilities are there, and we also have funding possibilities for special funding, and we also have some aims in the future for bringing artists over. At this moment, we are in our second crisis. Our first crisis was a financial crisis, which we just got over in February of this year, and then we went straight into the next crisis. So really thinking about international commissioning, that's really a wish still and future, but I think not too far out future. But we do work with local artists, also young artists, which we give the residency, and we have a program, Steve, you know about it, the New Makers program in the Netherlands. They have quite some funding for young artists who just are coming from school, for instance, which are just from school in 2 years when they have graduated. There's quite an enormous budget. You can apply for that from the Dutch Performing Arts. And these 2 years we have Tijn Wiebinga. And we made a whole program for 2 years, which has been extended now due to the crisis. And, he did like a pilot concert. He did some recording sessions. Also during Corona time, we had a different setup in the venue for recording. And he brought out an LP, and before that, a digital recording. And so we have this whole program where he is in. And I mean, you can call that really a decent residency, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And then what I should also tell about is that we coach him, or we fly in coaches for business and marketing issues and all kinds of things which are important for a young artist, next to composing and arranging and slowly going deeper, but also, you know, taking care of the business. Because when he flies out, so to say, he should also be able to organize his own tour and have some new connections, and also international connections. So that's a bigger picture of a residency.
Yeah.
And I actually have more examples of residencies we have.
Yeah. It sounds like you've got some really good systems in place in actually to kind of channel artists' ideas through to you, and I think that can be really helpful, a really good way of working with artists on sort of inviting them to put proposals together. But I think something that's really close to all of our hearts is actually making sure that in the final selections of artists, that the kind of public facing end of it, there's a true balance and diversity. And I'm just wondering if we could talk a bit about how we make sure that that balance is maintained in our decision-making processes when we do have those open, you know, is having an open artist's submission or application process good enough, or do we actually need to do more? Do we need to intervene more to make sure that there's a balance represented on our stages? I don't know, Frank, if you want to carry on that thread, or we could...
It's a good question, and it's difficult to answer, I think. I mean, I think if we would do an open application, I think we would get really many applications, you call it, then. Yeah. I'm not sure if we would be able to handle that. And yeah, for now, yeah, we choose the artists, we pick them out within our own aims and goals, which we have. And of course, diversity is an important one of those. Or, you know, we want more, we want the program more gender balanced. But we also, of course, we look at talent and interesting, which we think, which is artistic interesting at a certain moment. And also we want that to be diverse. So, you know, jazz is a very diverse genre nowadays. So, and we have quite a big venue with 250 seats and 400 places altogether. So we prefer to fill that up as much as possible. So, yeah, if one time we have like an experimental artist, then the next time we would maybe do a less experimental artist. And yeah, that's all together, that's how we make our choices. And if we throw it out in the open, that could quite be difficult to make a choice then in the right way.
Yeah, Xavier, going to bring you in. Is this something you find yourself having to think about, or to be proactive with when you're thinking of the artist you're going to work with?
Of course, I mean, the question for us here, the question for any residency project is, what's the project? What's the project of the artist? What's the project we are going to participate in? So it can be, I mean, it can be a new piece. It can be mostly also, we also have plenty of workshops or rehearsals, or maybe it can be, I mean, the project, and that's why it's not, for us, it's not especially a commission. Maybe we will ask the artist to go into, for example, a collaborative project. So in a way, we would commission him a collaborative project. But of course, the dialogue is very important with the artist. Me, I'm not. I don't think I can. I mean, it's the artist who will answer. It's the artist who will be in the ground, on the territory. So that's the thing. I wanted also to come back to the question of finance, because in a way, a residency is not especially a residency in in your venue, in your festival. It can be a residency in your territory. And then it depends on which territory you're talking about. I mean, if the territory is the city or the Paris area, for example, we can find many partners for a residency. We can find someone else who will host the show. We can find some partners, and not only public, for workshops. And we can also ourselves invest in the residency, meaning financing all the expenses, and then we will organize a tour, a small tour. We can even sell the product of the residency. And that's how we did recently also. I mean, since 2 or 3 years, we are making more what we call in French, we're the delegate producer. I mean, of a project, of a residency. And sometimes we even earn money without any public funds with this. And in a good, so of course it's a different job, it's lots of work, but it's rewarding also. And it can even be financially rewarding. And it will help the artist who has no producer, and we will, and of course it's responsibilities, it's lots of work, but it's very interesting. And now we're increasing this, I mean, for delegate productions, who are the result of residencies.
Yeah, that's good, because it's highlighting that there are different ways of doing it. There are different models that we can use and share, and that's really interesting. Yes, if you've just joined us, we're about halfway through. We're watching the latest EJN webinar, and we're discussing the racy topic of artist commissioning and residencies. So welcome along. Where have you been? You've missed all the swearing and all the nudity, but we've still got plenty of insights from our guests today: Susana Santos Silva, Xavier Lemettre, Frank van Berkel, and Greta Pieropan. Greta, I wanted to bring you in and talk about the audience, or those people who aren't the artist, as it were. And because when we met, we had a really interesting discussion about how you work involving the audience in process, rather than just as a receiver of the final product. And I loved that. That really chimed with me. And I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about your attitude, really, about how you've developed that. And also, as you said earlier, is audience even the right word nowadays?
Mm-hmm. So the experience in contemporary dance with artistic residency is that at the end of the residency, usually we open a sharing moment, and we call it sharing, where we invite the audience, so what was the audience, to witness how far the process has developed and to give feedbacks to the artists. So actually my role is to facilitate this encounter and this dialogue, because it's important. During an artistic research, it is so vulnerable as well, the material that you're working on, that the wrong or the comment on it can also destroy it, or destroy the confidence of the artist. So it is very important to invite both the audience and the artist to develop a common language, and to be able to talk about what they've been witnessing or sharing through in a different way and on another level, rather than I liked it or I didn't like it. And so to do so, we invited the artists to open their research sessions, to lead workshops that are open to everybody. So not just professionals, but also to everyone who's curious to join. Which also opens up a new land of professional possibilities, and pushes the artist to clearly look into their toolbox and develop new skills as well. And of course, the moments of dialogue between the communities and the artists are very important. And I like to focus on this word, communities, because of course, when we're talking to the they usually, when I ask them, who would you like to meet? Who are you addressing this work to? They always reply everybody, of course, but it is important to also focus on which audience can feed or nourish the research, and start a dialogue with them, because every small community is connected to another one, and then you can get to everybody.
Yeah. And Greta, do you see a change or a development in an artist's attitude towards the audience and the, or whatever we're calling them, or do you see a kind of a movement in a certain direction that changes the perspective of an artist when they are delivering work to an audience?
Well, absolutely. First of all, what changes is that there's no fear of judgment anymore. So, of course, there's this positive, energy of being also a bit nervous about presenting something, but they are aware that if it's not a finished work, it's not a problem. It's not going to be judged, but the people that are in front of them are there to help the research, or maybe help opening up a new one. And I also see, and it's something that always gives me joy, the artists little by little learn to letting go, which is something very difficult for them, or at least in the dance sector. I don't know about music, but when you're working on a new project, it's difficult to let go of complete control of it. Maybe Susana, you can help me on this. And presenting it to what you once considered an audience, and to people that might expect something ready, it's of course nerve-wracking. But when you know that you are building together a language, a vocabulary, and that you are in a safe space, then something clicks and the dialogue becomes collaboration.
Yeah, yeah. That's interesting. Greta, you mentioned artists looking into their musical toolbox, as it were, when they think about. Susana, just if you're kind of approaching this and delving in to grab your jazz hammer or your jazz spanner, what kind of that sort of relationship that Greta just talked about, the audience and the changing relationship, is that something you think about at all when you're even performing or creating work that is delivered in front of an audience? How do you kind of treat the audience, as it were, when you're thinking about your music?
Oof, this question has so many layers. I would say I don't think at all, and then I would say I think a lot as well. It's really different layers, and they kind of coexist all together. Normally in a performance, the moment I'm performing, I'm not thinking about the audience at all. I'm in another space where the audience actually is not there, or that would be the ideal, actually. But I mean, we are all in this together. If there's not an audience, then it's our work. It doesn't mean anything, really, not so much. And that's, I think many people are struggling right now, because there's no concerts and there's no audiences, and this thing of just going to the studio and record with no audience, a concert that's supposed to be live, and it's not the same. The energy is not there. The energy of the other people, it's of the audience, of the people, it's not there, and that it's a huge part of the whole thing. But I think that this interaction with the community, especially if you are going to another place that it's not your hometown, it's really interesting and important in a bigger picture. And it's very interesting to me. If I'm going to the other side of the world, or it doesn't need to be that far, but to a new place where I don't really know the culture so well, and this interaction with the community, with the culture, the local musicians, the local audience, it will really inform what my music will be at the end, and I want it. I want that that exchange of everything, really, in a even extra musical sense, and that because everything is connected. So this thing that Greta was talking about, it's really interesting to me that I would go to a place and I can interact with the community, and that I will open my practice room to people to come and take part of the process, because that will also open other doors to me. I will see things in a different way. They can even be really a part of the process, like interacting while the residency would go on. You know, that's something that I can really think of doing. But I know that it's very hard for many artists to have that interference, and it depends a lot on the kind of project as well that you are developing, I believe.
Yeah. And just before we turn to some of the questions coming into the chat, I'm just going to come to Xavier, because Susana, you just mentioned that concept of, you know, taking your music across the globe and performing in different locations, which is obviously something that none of us are doing very much at the moment. But I wonder if there's something about the efficiencies when we're talking about commissioning and residencies that we need to work on to, you know, save our planet a little bit more, to actually get more out, get more reach out of our efforts. You know, can with a bit of thought and effort, can we use COVID to steer us into maybe a new ecosystem for residencies and commissions? Xavier, is that something you want to come in on?
Yes, I mean, it's really, it's really very, it's the question of the moment, in fact. A few months ago, French musicians and French presenters made a manifesto called For an Ecology of Live Music, and it comes from our field, the jazz field mostly. And I mean, of course, it was related to the COVID, because, but it's also related to the planet and all the. I mean, it's really the thing which is the question of today. And of course, to reduce mobility for an artist can be very problematic, because if an artist doesn't travel, travels less, he will be less visible and he will earn less money. But in fact, artists and musicians began to think about that. And it's not a question only for artists. It's a question for presenters. It's a question for the whole ecosystem of music. There are means to reduce mobility. So this call is very interesting. If you can find it on the web. It's called For an Ecology of Live Music, pour une écologie de la musique vivante. We can I'm sure pass the link. And among, there are practical proposals. Among these proposals, the one of the most important is, yes, to less mobility means more residencies. I mean, instead of making lone gigs, you stay for a while in a territory. And so it's the responsibility also for the presenter to find other ways. And in fact, it's it's also, instead of taking the plane, you come by train and you spend 3 or 4 days, and you're making just a small residency of 2 or 3 or 4 days. It's already so much different. And especially in these times where we can only do small things with audiences, it's a very good way to experiment these new ways that I'm sure we will have to deal with, for sure. And it will be interesting for everybody. At one point, we'll manage to find new ways, and it will be interesting.
Yeah, and leading on from that, just looking into the chat now, some of the questions that have been coming in. So I'm not sure who this is, but we've got a question: can we, as organisers, broaden the concept of residency and focus more on the musicians' work before the concerts? We're mostly paying for the final product. We kind of talked about that, didn't we? Not for the process. Can the rehearsal process also be like a residency that we actually pay some wages for? Frank, do you want to respond to that one, building on what Xavier has just been talking about, perhaps?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, actually. Of course, it's a money thing again, but no, I think it's a great idea. I'm not sure how many people are really interested in that process. I think what Greta mentioned, I thought was really a great idea to, that musicians, that's part of the job, they're part of the commission, that they present the ongoing process to an audience who is maybe doesn't know really how that goes and how it works. And I think maybe in theater and dance they are more used to it because they work for 1, 2, or 3 months to get the whole show on the stage, and then they start with tryouts. People buy a ticket for a tryout, and they know it's not the premiere yet; it's not fully finished, and so they are kind of aware of that. And then when the premiere, it's really finished. In music, it works different, of course. Lots of music is played from sheet music, so you don't need to rehearse for 3 months. But still, no, yeah, it's an interesting thought. I would certainly also the idea of bringing in a residency and having the venue for a couple of nights in a row, doing the same show, which is kind of a different show every night when it comes to improvised music. Yeah, I would for sure like to work more on these things in the future, and also think about the idea of presenting the process instead of only the final
it's just
product.
making it interesting for the audience, isn't it? Anyone out there, if you've got any questions, do fire them off into the chat, and I'll try and pick up on them whilst we've still got 5 or 10 minutes to take them. I noticed that Piotr has shared something with us, and it's not really a question, but it's a comment. And commissioning new projects and working closely with artists during that process, it's so rewarding. He's loving it at Jazztapad and in Berlin. He says it's such a privilege to be able to do that, and he's right. Really, it is a great privilege to sort of create those opportunities and be involved in helping them out. He's also inviting us to cheer up a bit. I don't know whether I'm not telling enough jokes or whether we're just looking a little bit glum about the difficulties of the process. But of course, let's not forget there are some joys in the process and the result as well. And Greta, you strike me as someone who's had plenty of joys during and at the end of artist experiences. And I wonder if you want to share any of that experience. Oh, Greta's frozen in Italy, which is an unusual occurrence, but perhaps we'll come back. Xavier, do you want to kind of respond to what Piotr was saying, really, about that? All the good bits, the good stuff about doing it.
Well, for me now, it's the main stuff, because we did so. It's not only rewarding; it's interesting, it's fascinating, and we build new relationships also with audiences, of course, with the workshops with young audiences. So it's the honey of what we're building now. We're not a garage of concerts. We're doing other stuffs, and to help a musician into a project is also something very, very. It's part of our job. It's to help the music. It's to help the music being changing and renew itself. It's for the future of those teenagers or kids. So of course, yes. It's for me, it's the most privileged way of working now is this kind of thing. So and also it's in fact, I must say, economically. If you just think of all the money you don't spend anymore in plenty of travels and etc., it's also interesting. So and it doesn't mean that we'll stop having international trips. It's just another way of working. Of course, in jazz, it's still different because it's a practice for sure in theater, in dance, in other musics, and in jazz mostly. I mean, musicians only need a few hours or a few days to play together.
Yeah.
But to do something else also, to share with young or older people, to take some time to make research and experiment. In fact, the artists themselves were always nearly always. Of course, there can be some failures sometimes, and it's also a risk, and it's also the fun of it. but yeah, the artists themselves, for them, often it's a click. They find new territories, and they're out of their usual ways of doing it. So it's rewarding on every aspect.
Yes, absolutely. Greta, just before you disappeared, and welcome back. It's nice to see you after all these years. We were talking about the joys of enabling new music to happen. And I was saying that I'm sure that's something that joy in process and the joy of result is something that I think you've experienced yourself.
Yeah, of course. Well, I've experienced it at least in dance, in sharing the process with the audience. And yeah, I mean, it's always a privilege to be witnessing how a process develops, and also to witness how the audience interacts with it and helps it develop. At some point during this summer, actually, I've witnessed how the audience could become the eyes of a choreographer herself. More specifically, we had a choreographer who was based in Lviv, who couldn't come to Grapa, of course. Her name is Yasmin Goder, and so she worked with 4 of local dancers here on work on dealing with empathy. And so you imagine that through it was really, really difficult. So it was the choreographer herself who asked us to invite people inside the studio, of course, distancing and wearing masks, and she asked them to witness the rehearsals while she was there on a screen hiding, and then she appeared and she engaged a conversation with them, and she prepared some questions, and she actually told me, the audience, they are my now. And for me, that was a moment of joy, because the audience that experienced the first rehearsals then came to the final presentation, if a final presentation exists, because it's always an ongoing process, even when you have the premiere, And yeah, that's for sure something that reminds me why a creative process is about joy as well.
Yeah. Just you cut out a very critical word there. What did she say? That the audience is my what? Sorry.
Eyes.
Greta? Eyes. Oh, the audience is
Eyes.
my eyes.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. Very nice. That's good. Susanna,
And it
just
brings
to
us
come
back to also letting go.
Yeah.
It's
Absolutely.
of control.
Yeah. The eyes, Susanna, or the ears for you as an artist?
Everything, all the senses, really. Everything is really one big thing, I guess. And that also goes for this connection with communities, with other people, with the audience, with the other one. That's a little bit what this COVID situation also showed us, that everything is linked, and we can't really make art without being involved with what it's around us. So it has to be this two-way energy going on. So yeah, everything is important.
Yeah. Well, we've reached the end, really, and I think that's a really nice point to leave it, actually, because that energy that you're talking about, I think, is prevalent across all our expectations and hopes for the future. I think as we go forward, not with just commissioning and residency models, but live music making. Full stop. Just before we do wrap up, I just wanted to bring everyone's attention to the next webinar in this series. It's going to be taking place a week today, Tuesday, the 22nd of December at 16:30 Central European time. And it's entitled Fly Me to the Moon, What Will Change for the International Mobility of Artists After COVID-19? Transnational mobility has been severely curtailed in 2020 due to COVID-19. When we're again able to travel and gather in large numbers, what will change and how can we build new models for international touring and exchanges? And that's going to be moderated by the unshakable Martel Olrenshaw from the Australian Music Centre. So she'll be doing her best Frank Sinatra impression for the Fly Me to the Moon session next Tuesday at 16:30. Okay, I can sense Giambattista in the EJN office with his hand firmly gripping the office doorknob, waiting to escort us out of the building and back into society. But before he does, it just remains for me to thank my wonderful guests today for sharing their time and their insights with us. Susana Santos Silva, Xavier Lemettre, without an S, and Greta Pieropan and Frank van Berkel. What a band. There's some jazz names there and decidedly plain next to them all. So I do hope you'll find time and space over the upcoming holiday periods to at least move slower, and if not, go deeper. So from us all here and from me, Steve Mead, it's goodbye